It feels to me like this country is waking up from a dream a little bit. Like, this shouldn't be happening. Why is this happening? And someone else will fix it. Someone's going to fix it. As we sit today, April 6, 2025, financial markets last week had a massive, massive sell-off in the stock market. Huge drop. And now as we sit Sunday night, the Asian markets have opened, the commodities markets and the futures, and they're already down as well. About 1,500 points tonight. So what I had planned to talk about was just more like recovery type stuff. What I think is going to be more important for people and impactful for people, be prepared for change. Be prepared to navigate a lot of change. It's coming in hot. And I believe that we are at a crossroads right now where people are starting to wake up to the idea that all of this may be good in theory, these ideas, these economic things that they're trying to do, essentially. But in practicality, the way that they're being executed, it's quite difficult to follow. But one of the things that we should bear in mind, and I'm a Gen Xer, right? So I distinctly remember the economic crash in 1987. Now, I was in high school, but I remember it because my father is he's an attorney, but he's specialized in securities law. And I remember the devastation that he experienced that day and the anger, and I feel like we're really going to have to hold some people's hands through what may be coming economically this week. I hope not. But it does happen in the market. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, wow, how many corrections have I been through? 87, I watched the crash. 2000, we had the dot-com bust. Then, of course, we had the 2008. It wasn't all just... And, of course, the COVID-19. And now. So one of the things I want to talk about is, in this, I'm going to bring it to Buddhism. I'm going to take it from the financial markets and bring it to Buddhism. Trust me on this, right? But this goes back to self. We're going to there are many people that identify their value inherently based on their bank accounts, right? That is their proof, essentially, that they've made the right choices, they've made good decisions, and that they're worthy, and that, the amount of money they have is also the amount of value that they have in our society. And in a capitalistic society, obviously, that's quite encouraged, right? And it seems to be kind of the truth. But are you a different person when you don't have money? No. You're the same person. But if you've built up a false identity, and one of the things that you have consistently prized yourself on and been proud of for yourself about yourself is your mastery of finance and, your accumulation of wealth, whenever there's a big shock to a market and a shock to a system like this, it's a shock to people's identities as well. I'm concerned. I worry about the attachment that people have in this country to money, as if the amount of money you have is proof that you're better or you're superior or just more deserving, I guess, is kind of where I'm going with it. But I don't believe that's true. But if you've built this up in your mind, because, for example, there are a lot of reporters, and I watch a lot of media, right? People are having to now start walking back and eating their own words, because even just a week ago, like, for example, Jim Cramer, who's, Mad Money, he's been a contributor on cable television in the finance sector since there's been one, right? Pretty much. And he actually has been going around in interviews and saying, I was wrong. I got it wrong. I thought the president was going to do this, and he did that, and we might be in trouble, folks. So why am I bringing this up? in comedy centered? Well, there's going to be a lot of, if things continue to spiral, I really fear for overdoses. I really fear for increases in domestic violence, increases in DWI, increases in, all the coping mechanisms we are here to try to kind of get rid of, right? When people are under extreme stress, because one of the things, and when I say we've got to hold our other people's hands through some of this stuff, I really do, because my heart really does go out to people that are about to have their minds blown, that a lot of the things that were promised aren't going to come true, and in fact our country is going to go through a very, very rough period of time that was largely self-inflicted. And people are going to question the loyalty to those ideas. But at the same time, and while we want to encourage people to more accurately see some of the things that have been going on, at the same time, what's hard about when someone's in a group, a highly cohesive group, which we talk about a lot, and I got my group think book here, and we're going to talk about that a little bit at the end, but because I've got a couple more passages I'm going to read to you guys, but when you're in a highly cohesive group where there's almost never any criticism of the leader, the charismatic leader, the fact that like a Jim Cramer is saying there's a problem, that's huge. But what I'm afraid of is that people are going to stay stuck, because if you've been in one of those highly cohesive groups, you see what happens when someone leaves that group. You see how the other group members treat that person who leaves, and it ain't nice, right? And no one likes the experience of being talked about behind their back, right? So let's say some people are realizing that maybe this is not the best economic course for our country, but they've personally, because I've had this happen, I've had this in some of my very close relationships, I have friends that have been telling me pretty much nonstop for the last 10 years that I'm wrong about my viewpoints about economic policy, and Donald Trump knows more about it than I do. And maybe he does, I don't know the man, right? But I've had friends kind of like aggressively throwing Trump in my face and calling, teasing me and calling me names. And, a lot of people, the first thing that they want to do is they want to be like, well, I told you so, you get what you voted for, and da-da-da-da. That does not help our country get out of this, guys. That might be fun for a minute, but, then you're basically trolling someone. That's really all you're kind of doing, A lot of people's perceptions of what they thought they could count on in this society and what they thought the rules were and what the norms are, they're kind of all up in the air right now. And so what I've been saying to my friends on the left and the contacts I'm keeping with my friends on the right is the fact that as much as possible, if we can try to not gloat, because this screws us all. This is not good. No, I don't want the stock market to go down. This is going to really, really, really gum up the economic recovery that we already built since the pandemic. And the other thing that people don't seem to talk about in America is that the recession after the pandemic was global. In the United States, we hold our politicians personally responsible for the economy, but the president is never in charge of the economy, and other countries don't do that. Their press doesn't do that. So a lot of this stuff is self-manufactured. This idea that there's this American ideal that we know more than the rest of the world, that, we're the leaders, we're the boss, American exceptionalism. And a lot of people have bought into that, and they've also made that their identity as well. And it's not your identity. Anything that can be taken away from you isn't really you. You know what I mean? So if the money can be taken away from you, then it's not you. You are you, regardless of material factors. But if you say that I've attached my worth and my identity to this object or this currency or this ideal, when your head cracks open and you start seeing things from a different perspective, it's so disorienting. And it's going to be really disorienting for a lot of people. A lot of people are going to realize that even though they thought that things were going to work out to their benefit, it really doesn't seem like it's going to in anywhere near the short term. And maybe in the long term, I don't know. I understand the idea of like the United States not wanting to pay for absolutely everything all over the world, but we kind of set it up that way because we wanted to control everything all over the world. So anyway, I'm going to revisit my groupthink. Oh, here. Okay. I had a couple of little quotes I wanted to jot down. The thing we repress controls us. And that's Carl Jung. And it's true. So if your identity is attached to your financial net worth and you lose that money, and that's your sense of pride, that money's controlling you. You know? And what you're probably repressing is the sense that if I don't have this money, I'm not a valuable person. I don't have worth. The money is the proof that I have worth. And that's not true. That's not true. That's not at all. That is an idea that is popular with people that like to sell other people's stuff. You know? What are the good things in life? It's not counting money, you know? So anyway, Groupthink Syndrome. This is a book that was written about politics, and it was written back in the 60s, I believe. And it's an analysis of how colossal mistakes can happen in governments. And they've noticed that there are certain types of group dynamics that will greatly increase the odds of bad decision making happening, right? Two of these groups, one is when it's a group that's highly non-cohesive. Basically, everybody in the group, no one gets along in the group, so nothing ever gets done and they don't make good decisions because they don't get along. That's one. That's not what we're talking about. The second one is groupthink. And that is when the group is so cohesive that there is an undercurrent and a demand for 100% agreement about anything that the leadership of that particular group likes. And in the embrace of that, people repress very valuable information and dissenting opinions that are important to be addressed, especially when you're making military decisions, economic decisions. Here are some symptoms of groupthink. Type 1. Overestimations of the group, its power, and its morality. An illusion of invulnerability shared by most or all of the members, which creates excessive optimism and encourages taking extreme risks. Number 2, an unquestioned belief that in the group's inherent morality, inclining the members to ignore the ethical or moral consequences of their decision. So the unquestioning belief is in the group itself. It's no longer in you, the person. It's in the group, the larger group, the groupthink. Closed-mindedness is another type of groupthink. Collective efforts to rationalize in order to discount warnings or other information that might lead members to reconsider their assumptions before they recommit themselves to their past policy decisions. Basically, a discounting of warnings and new information as it's coming in that should warrant a revisitation of policy procedures, and you should go, we have this new information, does this policy still make sense? And in these group dynamics, that's usually being skipped. Okay? Stereotyped views of enemy leaders as too evil to warrant genuine attempts to negotiate with, or too weak or stupid to counter whatever risky attempts are made to defeat their purposes. Type 3. Pressures towards uniformity. This one is important. Self-censorship of deviations from the apparent group consensus, reflecting each member's inclination to minimize to himself the importance of his doubts and counter-arguments. Self-censorship of really important information. A shared illusion of unanimity concerning judgments conforming to the majority view, partly resulting from censorship of deviations, augmented by the false assumption that silence means consent. So, how many times have you been in a work meeting, like me, and they ask, are there any questions? And you have a ton of questions. But all the questions you're going to ask are going to put the person who asked you, if there are any questions, on the spot. They're your leader for that meeting. And asking questions of the leader that aren't necessarily positive in nature, that could be construed as critical, is risky. Because they may take it personally, and they may take it the wrong way. So what do we generally do? Well, at least what I do is I keep my mouth shut. But the silence makes everybody think they agree. You know? Silence is violence, as they say. Okay. Direct pressure on any member who expresses strong arguments against any of the group's stereotypes, illusions, or commitments, making clear that this type of dissent is contrary to what is expected of all loyal members. One more time. Direct pressure on any member who expresses strong arguments against any of the group's stereotypes, illusions, or commitments. Any. And what they're saying is, if you criticize the group think and the leader, the charismatic leader of this particular group, you are dishonoring the group and you are showing disloyalty to it by even raising the question. Raising the question assumes on your part there may be something that you've thought of that the leader hasn't thought of, and the leader's thought of everything. Just ask them. Okay. Number 8. The emergence of self-appointed mind guards, members who protect the group, mind guards, members who protect the group from adverse information that may shatter their shared complacency about the effectiveness and morality of their decisions. Who would be one of the mind guards? Well, that would be corporate media. Corporate media tells us how we're supposed to feel about things, right? And so part of why people distrust mainstream corporate media is because mainstream corporate media does seem to serve its own self-interest far more than it does keeping its, viewers informed. They really just want you to buy the bath lotion in between the commercials. They don't. So, but also too, if you get all of your information from non-mainstream media sources, because they're non-mainstream, they don't have the legal liability if they print something that's false. And so there's a balance there. There's more checks in the accuracy of reporting when you use traditional legacy media, but then also traditional legacy media is owned by large corporations that want to sell you a lot of stuff. So there. Mind guards. But we can also take all of these and we can take politics out of it. If I just hit the highlights of these 8 descriptors, this also describes quite well being in a relationship with a narcissistic parent, a narcissistic partner, right? Their illusion, they project an illusion of being invulnerable. You know, they require an unquestioned belief in the group's morality, right? So someone who's controlling, what do? The narcissist, of course, they want to project to you that they're completely invulnerable. And they want you to 100% agree that their morality is the morality of choice and you should follow theirs. Collective efforts to rationalize in order to discount any warnings about their behavior. Stereotyping other people as enemy leaders. Well, those could be just people that the narcissist doesn't want you hanging out with. Like, well, I don't like your friend Trudy. Every time you go out and hang out with Trudy, you come back in a bad mood and you don't like me anymore and blah, 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 right? So, groupthink syndrome is also corporate America. This is not just politics. This is how we as humans operate in groups. And when you have a leader at the center of a group that's very charismatic, you're drawn to that person. You want to be near that person. You want to absorb their energy. You want to absorb their knowledge. You want them to lead you. You want all of it, right? You want more. That's fine. As long as you continue to agree with them for always and forever. That's all. And, the easiest way I can explain how the narcissistic mind works is because, part of the other reason of discussing some of these items is that one of the hardest things for a human being to cope with is betrayal. And being conned is for sure a betrayal. When we want to impress others, when we want to blend into the group, when we don't want to stick out, when we don't want to be the one person who says the negative thing and pisses everybody off because, we just want to keep going on with our lives onward and upward. That silence, though, keeping your mouth shut when there's something that's important to be said, something that you feel passionately needs to be expressed, otherwise a mistake could happen or a miscalculation could occur. I encourage you to speak your truth. It can be, when you have to put the group and the group's interest above your own self-interest, then that's something to really, really consider for yourself, if that is a healthy mental health space for you to hang out in anyway. All right, a little rambly at the end. But, that's kind of usually actually how Comedy Centered goes, right? But it is 6:30. Happy Sunday, everybody. Hope you have a good weekend, everybody. Just don't look at the market tomorrow. But remember, your worth is not defined by your bank account. It's not. So, everybody stay centered as best as you can. Navigating change is super, super hard. And, take care, everybody.